All right. Hello, everybody. We're going to get started in a moment. And I'm going to share my screen. I see somebody named iPad 4. I wonder who that is. Who's joining us?
That's Geraldine Miller.
Hey, Geraldine. Great to hear you. I'm so glad you're with us. Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. I do love seeing the smiling faces. It helps me do a better job. So
I'm sure. The only thing is I'm in the middle of cooking and eating. So
I understand how that is. But now that I know who it is, that's great. And oh, Nancy, so glad that you could join us too. Fantastic. So I understand. And when you need to, if you're going to be doing something distracting, you know to mute, and you can also turn your video off. I understand that. All right. So today we are talking about how to bulletproof your immune system. And I believe we're going to have some people that are jumping on a little bit late, but we are going to be recording so that those of the folks that couldn't join us, that they're able to join in later on and just, get this really important information. So I am going to start by sharing my screen. If I can bring it up, here we go. And oh, I see. I just need to, I got one technical thing to take care of here for a moment. Just let me bring up the correct PowerPoint. That is not it. And I'll find it right over here. So give me a moment here. Okay, got it. And I did run into a technical difficulty of me not being able to get my slides to show in slideshow mode. So instead, they are, let's see, there we go. We're going to actually do it in a little bit more rustic way, but you're still going to get the information. So here, let me just share my screen now. Let's see. I have a lot of things open here. Here we go. Okay. And just one more moment. And I believe there's a few other people that are going to be joining us as well. I have the right screen. Yeah, that's not it. Hang on. Okay, I should be able to find it. There we are. All right. Sharing. We're ready to go. Okay. Hey, Richard, you made it. Perfect. All right. Thank you for joining us. And I love seeing faces because it helps me do a better job. And so greetings to everybody there. And if there's other folks in the background that I don't know about, if Nancy, if Peter is watching with you, hello to you too. And hello to everybody that's out there. So I'm going to start with a story. Albert Einstein was teaching a class one day. And he had students in his class that had been with him for over a few years. And he was giving a test. And one of the students raised their hand when they looked at the questions on the test, and they said, Dr. Einstein, I'm a little confused. These questions are the same questions that we had before. And Dr. Einstein's reply was, the questions may be the same, but the answers are different. And so I just want to take that idea because, people have been asking the same questions for hundreds of years. How do I stay healthy? How do I minimize my risk of getting sick? And in these days, how do I minimize the chances of being hit by a virus or even killed by a virus? And how do I minimize chances for having drugs or surgery or, any kind of medical procedures? Like, people have been asking these questions for hundreds of years. And although the questions are the same, the answers are different. And that's the message that I want to share with you tonight. So I want to also just acknowledge all of you that are here, that there's something about you that is curious and that you are looking for answers. And the media pretty much seems to be just keeping the answers, the old questions and the same old answers, and stirring up as much fear and uncertainty as possible. But I want to have some different answers tonight for you. And that's where we're going to go with this. Now, I know that whenever I attend conferences myself, sometimes I'll get some great information and I'll go home and I have full intentions of executing on it and incorporating it into my life. And then, you know, something happens and I just never get around to it. And so I hope that's going to be different for you. And I hope that what you're going to get out of this workshop is action steps. That's really my intent, is that you have action steps of what you can do to change your outcomes. The old name for this workshop was how to boost your immune system in 21 days. And I literally had people report back to me 3 weeks later that when they implemented things, they noticed a significant improvement. So I am going to encourage you to take some notes on the action steps that you want to take for yourself. And staying engaged tonight with me is really going to be the difference between whether you get good value or not. You know, if you go to the gym and there's a bunch of people there all working out, and then there's the person that intended to go to the gym, but just never took the action step to get there, who's going to get the most benefit, right? It's the people that actually fully engage. So for those of you that are not showing me your video, but are there, I would like to use the benefit of, and I want to see if I can see it as well. If you go to your, the little down the bottom, it has the like a raise your hand or a smiley or a thumbs up or something like that. See if you can just give me a thumbs up if you see how to use that. I can't always see the chat when I'm presenting with my slides, so I want to see if I can catch any of that. If you do like raise a hand or give a thumbs up. Okay, I do see, Geraldine, I do see your hand there. Very good. So I'm waving back to you now. All right, so if everybody can give me some sort of a symbol. Yeah, okay, Nancy, I got your thumbs up. Okay, great. And then Richard, can you find a thumbs up there too? Yes, perfect. Okay, great. So as I'm that's going to be great because I can't see the chat. If you're typing things in the chat, I won't be able to see it. So if you can please, as I go through this, when you get something that's a good aha for you or something that's useful for you, just give me a thumbs up, something like that. And that way I'll know that you're staying fully engaged and that what I'm offering you is working. And again, just the idea of taking action steps, really this is about not just you, but maybe also about people you know, family members, friends, coworkers, neighbors, that I'm going to say something, you're going to think of someone that you know. So I want you to be thinking about how, if this resonates for you at the end, I want to make sure that I have things that you can do for you and your family so that you can all be healthier. Because the truth is that no one is coming to save us. No one is coming to save us. It's all going to be up to us. And we can save ourselves. We just have to know the right things to do. And so I love this concept of the phoenix, just the idea of, you know, rising out of the ashes, and that oftentimes people come to me and they feel like things are hopeless. And then we find out that there actually is more function available than they had expected. There's more things that they can do. And oftentimes the pivot points of how they even make themselves, how they end up in my facility, there's all different ways that people end up there. So I know that when I attend conferences, oftentimes if I hear the background story of the speaker, I seem to get more out of it. So I'd like to just take a moment to share my story and how that applies to this very topic and what my experiences have been around the immune system for myself and for members of my practice. So my story with chiropractic actually starts when I was about 3 years younger than this image shows. And what happened was my dad was becoming a chiropractor, and in his journey on becoming a chiropractor, he went away to school. And when he came back one time, I was sick with strep throat. And he said, we just need to check your spine and nervous system. And he gave me my first chiropractic adjustment. And a couple hours later, I could swallow more easily and it didn't hurt so much and I got better really fast. And I just thought, okay, this is amazing. And that was really what set me on my path to realizing that, healing comes from the inside. And my dad, his explanation was, we just had to turn the power back on. And so I got that at 13 years old, I got that. And I think from that time on, it planted this seed. And here we are, about 40 years later. And over my journey, I've helped over 10,000 people get their health back. And it's been creating pivot points along the way of what do these people need to do what do we need to do to just build health in the individual in front of me. So I think that experience also planted a seed in me of what my purpose was in life and how I was going to spend my life helping other people. And here I am today doing this workshop, which I've done probably about 50 times before over the years. And it's a very popular topic and now more than ever. So I want to now recognize that one thing I learned, again, just from my very first experience with my dad adjusting me and my immune system improving in function. And it was not because, that it was that, I don't know how to explain it. I guess I could really see that there was a power in me that was expressing itself, that healing power. And, before that, my mom had taken me to the pediatrician and I was supposed to take these pills that I couldn't take because I couldn't swallow anything, not even the pills. And that idea was that the healing was going to come from that pill. But my experience was that the healing came from me. And so I recognized the power that I had. And over the years, I think what I have recognized in those 40 years of what I've seen in the 10,000 and more people I've worked with is that there's a natural state that actually is extraordinary levels of health, and that I envision a world where the natural state is extraordinary health, and that there's a direction that we need to be heading in, but there's something that's holding us back from that. And this is what I think it is today. One of the problems today is that everyone is focused on the strength of the virus and no one is focusing on the strength of the host. And that's where this conversation needs to change. We need to start focusing on the strength of the host. And here's why. We used to be the super species on the planet. What I mean by that is we were the species that could go anywhere on the planet, go to any climate, any terrain, and we would figure out not just how to survive, but how to thrive. Whereas when you look at other species on the planet, they kind of have a defined environment that they're going to do best in. And if they stick to that, they're going to be good. But we really were the super species on the planet. But today, we are the sickest species on the planet. We are the species that has the most chronic illness of any other species. And, if we were to notice that another species was having some problem where they were having declining health, the first thing that we would do is not look at each individual one, but we'd start to notice, whoa, if they're all having trouble here, okay, something's gone wrong with their environment. That's what we would do. And we'd probably question, what did we do to screw up their environment that's now harming them? And once we tweaked things and we figured out how to reestablish a healthy environment, then we'd see the health come back in that species. Somehow we missed that for our own species. And many times my colleague, Dr. James Chestnut, he has a great way of saying this. He says that so many people think that what's happening in their health is due to either bad germs, bad genes, or bad luck. But actually, it's bad behavior that's the problem. So we used to be the super species. We're now the sickest species. The problem is that we're still acting as though we are Superman. We're acting as though we can just do whatever we want. And the results are, we have something that's going to help us manage our decline. And that's the state of our healthcare culture as we see it manifesting now in our country and in the countries around the world, we can see it. So we were born superheroes, but we have become weak. And again, the problem is not that we have a badass virus in town. The problem is that we are no longer the badasses that we were designed to be. That's the problem. we have to change this conversation. Now let's just look at what is the formula for getting the level of health that you want. Anybody you talk to, they're going to agree there's three components to the health equation. There's the genetics, what you have inherited, and let's just recognize that your genes are what have been passed down to you from 3,700 generations behind you. That's like going back, what, 40 to 60,000 years. And that's when our genes were set. And for the most part, our genes have changed very little over all that time. But some other things have changed over that time. So when we look at the environment and the lifestyle, we know today that our genes can be upregulated and downregulated, right? Our genes can turn up and turn on and start to express, or they can be dormant. And the thing that will upregulate or downregulate our genes are two things: our environment and our lifestyle. Now, when we study this whole field of genetics, and I've done a lot of study on that in the last 6 years or so, one of the things that I always take away, even from the advanced genetics conferences that I attend, this is the thing that I take away. We know that 99.4% of us have the perfect genetic, what we call the genome, of the perfect genome to express perfect health, as long as we have the right environment over time. That's what the foundation, the basics are. And so when we look at gene expression, again, it's going to be our environment, our lifestyle that are going to impact how our genes express. So we've got this amazing blueprint. And remember, we wouldn't be here if we didn't come from 3,700 generations of successful human beings, right? That's where we've landed. And so we have inherited a potential of genetic expression. So we've got this great blueprint, but now we need the proper building materials, right? We can have a great recipe, but we've got to get the right ingredients in order to make that amazing dish that we want to make. So, and I still have people that'll say to me, but doc, you don't understand, diabetes, it runs in my family. And my response is, the problem is not that diabetes runs in your family. The problem is that nobody's running in your family. It's lifestyle, it's environment. There's so much that is going to be impacting genetics that is all about our environment and our lifestyle. And so let's just take a look at this here. Just look at some statistics here. Global obesity trends among girls and boys. Look at how there's like a hockey stick inflection point here that's happening. These are the obesity trends since 1985. Holy cow, it's just going through the roof. And listen, genes don't change that fast. So this is not a problem with the genes. This is a problem with environment and lifestyle that is triggering this upregulation of the expression of obesity. And you can see the next generation is getting there faster and faster, and it has devastating implications, right? The next generation is in trouble. And when we look at the studies, even if we take this factor of just the increase in obesity, and I'm building this picture of how we were the super species and we have become weak. We were superhuman and we have become weak. And this is one of the ways that is showing up. And how does that apply when a pandemic moves through? Obesity is linked to severe coronavirus disease, especially for younger patients. We can see it. And these were studies that were done actually pretty early on with the pandemic. And so obesity is known to cause chronic low-grade inflammation. That's an important one, because you can have low-grade inflammation and not be obese, and that's still going to be a factor for you. And that is what's going to have an increase in the circulating pro-inflammatory cytokines. And that, again, may play a role in some of the worst COVID-19 outcomes. So in this study from China, they had 88% of the patients who had the bad outcomes, who died, were obese. 88% of them were obese. And so obesity is linked to chronic disease. It's already well known that obesity is linked to any other kinds of chronic disease, whether it's cardiovascular disease or cancer or diabetes. Like, we know there's already a link there. But even back in 2009, in the H1N1 influenza epidemic, it showed that the people with obesity were more vulnerable to infectious diseases. We already knew that, and that was in 2009, we saw those links. Studies have also shown that folks that are obese do not get the same protection from the influenza vaccinations as others do. So it's even compromising when they're trying to you do something to mitigate it. They actually will not have the same favorable outcomes. Here's another study that, again, that just showed that, and this is one of the largest US studies at the time of COVID-19, it found obesity was the single biggest chronic factor in the New York City hospitalizations. And so when you look at the US, like where do we stand here? The US has the 12th highest rate of obesity on the planet. There are only, we're the only country in the top 25 countries that has that highest rate of obesity. So, we have to ask the question, is there more that we can do to be a healthier nation? And, what can we be doing to prepare for the next pandemic or the next virus that comes our way? It's time for us to have a real national discussion about the overall health of Americans. Like that's where this conversation should be going. And look at what our stats show us, right? We can see even with diabetes, look at how it's just escalating. If we just look at, over the last 50 years, we can just see the trend of where it's going. And this particular next study was the most disturbing one I had ever encountered as I was in practice. And this was something that came out in 2009. People have never been sicker. For the first time in the history of man, children born after the year 2000 are not expected to live as long as their parents. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes when you throw all these stats up, your eyes kind of glaze over and it just seems like it's too overwhelming. Like, oh my gosh, like I can't even handle this information. And you kind of, you blank out with it. But I'm not going to let you have that happen tonight because I want you to just think like, is it okay with you if your children do not live as long as you, or your sister's children, or your best friend's children? Like, is that okay with you? Because we need a better way than what's happening here. And that was since 2009, and it has not changed. We've known that since 2009. It has not changed. So when we look at the chronic illness in our children, right? If you look back in the 1960s or so, it was about, I think it was about 2 to 5% of children had some sort of chronic illness. Today, it is over 50%. The majority of children have some sort of chronic illness today, and we're now just starting to normalize it. And so obesity, that's one of the linchpins to chronic disease. But the fact that we have treatments of chronic disease that reaches 86% of our healthcare burden, the amount of money we're spending on healthcare, 86% of it is going towards chronic disease. And it hasn't changed. It just continues to be that. So it's lifestyle. The chronic illnesses are lifestyle diseases. And, obesity and smoking are some of the landmark pieces to that. But if we look at the prevalence of chronic disease in the US and look at, where we are in the lifespan, right? US ranks 34th in life expectancy at birth, 34th. And we spend the most on healthcare of any other country. And we're getting these kinds of outcomes where children are not even starting out their life in a healthy way when we get these kinds of numbers. And then we go on from there and we're seeing the chronic illness that comes up. So, when we look at, again, what are the trends showing us? We have to pay attention to this because, again, we can kind of glaze over, but these are people in our communities that are experiencing the same thing. Look at the prevalence of chronic disease in the US, right? Look at that. It is, enormous here. So it's just a steady rise that's going up and up and up. So we were born superheroes, but we have become weak. And again, it's not because of there suddenly being a badass virus. It's because we are not the badasses that we were designed to be. So let's recognize the superpowers that we actually do have, that we were born with. And this is, I just love this part because, just remember, you were born with these superpowers. You did not have to earn them. You did not have to train yourself to get them. You did not have to work for them. They're just there. They're inborn superpowers that we're born with. And this is one of the best, I just love this example. So breast milk. breast milk is such an amazing thing. And the thing that's amazing about it is it's delivering the exact nutrients that the immune system needs for that child. There's actually a communication that happens between the mother and the child, the mother and the baby, where as the baby is suckling and the breastfeeding is happening, there's an exchange of information where the baby is programming the mother's milk to deliver exactly the ingredients that that baby needs that day. And then the next day, the baby's going to program the mother's milk to deliver something else. And look at this evidence right here. Now, I hope that you can see this, that the right hand, and this is breast milk that was pumped from the same mother. The one on the left was pumped one day. The one on the right was pumped after a night of breastfeeding a feverish baby. The one on the right is loaded with specific immune system elements that that baby needed all night long. Wow, wow, right? That baby is actually an awesome doctor because that baby is telling the mother exactly the prescription that that baby needs in order to help it just regain its health, restoring its health. It's actually telling the mother, please make this for me. This is what I need, right? Isn't that incredible? Just like within 24 hours, how different the ingredients of that milk is for targeting exactly for that baby and what that baby needed. They actually have studies that show that if a woman is breastfeeding and then that baby now for some reason has to be fed by a different mother, that baby will reprogram that mother's milk to deliver what that baby needs. It's extraordinary. That is a superhuman power there, right? It's a superpower. All right, what are some other examples of superpowers? I like to look at the gut wall, right? The gut wall, when you're born, your gut wall, the lining of your gut, it's actually very permeable until you're about 2 years old. So if you've heard the word leaky gut, that's where things can get in very easily into the bloodstream. And when you're 2 years old, up until you're 2 years old, you're basically supposed to get a lot of breast milk in there. And when you get that breast milk into the body, it actually jumpstarts the immune system. And it can leak in and get in very easily. And then as the gut wall tight junctions develop, that's happening as the child's teeth are developing. And when the child's teeth break through, it's when they're ready to eat on their own. And then they're going to start to eat other things besides that beautiful, perfect breast milk. And so now those tight junctions have to get solidified so that there can be a lot of selection on what is allowed to get into the body. So that is a superpower, right? That gut wall is a superpower that we're just born with. I love this superpower of having T killer cells, right? So the T killer cells are specifically there to find and kill cancer. It's part of our design. They just go out looking, finding cancer cells and killing them, right? That's a superpower that we have. What about fevers? Fevers is another superpower. And that's the way to heat up our bodies in order to kill off pathogens. But we survive, right? We heat up the body, it kills the pathogen, but we survive. It's a superpower. And there's actually a window of development in a child. By 3 years old, they need to have a 103-degree fever in order to coordinate the immune systems and the nervous systems so that for the rest of that child's life, it will have an efficiently functioning immune system. Oh my gosh, what parent wouldn't want to know that? And yet now we have the media programming the parents, telling them that if their child has a little fever at all, they're going to the medicine cabinet to bring that fever down, right? Don't we see that? So here we have this superpower that we're squashing because the media is now, the marketing of the media is telling us that we need to do something different, that we can't trust that what the body is doing is going to be effective and appropriate. And that is exactly the body's way of readily and appropriately adapting to the environment. Okay, vomiting. Vomiting is awesome. It is awesome. Why is that? Because it's your body's way of identifying a toxin and getting it out as soon as possible, right? And if we don't get it out one end, we have another superpower of getting it out the other end as fast as possible as well. Is it convenient? Is it comfortable? Maybe not, but it is a superpower, right? And so we don't want to override that superpower. We want to support that superpower because it's doing an important job for us. So we have all these superpowers. What are the implications of us getting weak? What is the result of, we, over the years, maybe children are not being breastfed the way they used to in the past. Maybe our gut walls we're having leaky gut throughout our life because of the damage that happens to them. Maybe our immune systems are not built up and strong the way they should be, right? Maybe we have squashed those fevers instead of letting them move through the body the way they need to, right? We feel nauseous, we take a drug so we stop feeling nauseous instead of like just vomiting it up. So our culture has us so that we just want to be comfortable. We don't want to feel things. And so we have a way of managing things, right? So we know that the chronic illnesses, that they are lifestyle illnesses. We know that exercise, good sleep, good diet, like lots of those healthy lifestyle choices will literally shift the trajectory somebody's on and literally can change the presence of diabetes, the presence of chronic cardiovascular disease. We know that those things can have an impact, but we've gotten weak and we're in a place where it's become okay to manage those chronic illnesses with medications. So you can have high blood pressure, and instead of changing your lifestyle to deal with it, you can be on a medication to just manage it. But what we see is that that has actually created more vulnerability to our population, so that because we have become weak, when a pandemic comes through, what is the outcome of that? The world shuts down. The world shuts down. If we were the superhumans and the super species that we were designed to be, no problem if a pandemic comes through, we can just handle it, right? And so we're going to just discuss that in a moment here, more about this idea of what is the implication of a pandemic coming through of an individual or in a community. So what is the implications of us getting weak? Well, COVID-19 is an example, right? And the best that our country could come up with, again, we spend the most of any other country in the world on healthcare, and the best our country could come up with was stay at home and wash your hands, no hugging or high fives, and hope and pray for a vaccine. Like that was the best that we could come up with, right? And instead, we didn't just shut down a town or a state, we shut the world down. And it's shut down because a segment of our population was vulnerable, right? So again, we have to change the conversation. We have to stop focusing on the strength of the virus. We have to start focusing on the strength of the host. And we have to focus on the weakness of the host and who's weak here and what do we need to do to make them strong. Because there is going to be another badass virus that comes to town. So you need to be badass to be ready for it, right? And you need to be equipped to deal with it. You need to have time to focus on getting you stronger so that when the next virus comes, you won't be weak. Who's with me on that? Give me a thumbs up if you're tracking with me on this, that we need a better way. So we have to ask the question, how did we get weak? How did this come about? And I think there's a few things that we need to look at that are important here if we're going to make any change at all. And if you don't get the next part of what I'm saying, then the rest of it doesn't necessarily make sense. So listen closely here. Why do we have the situation we have? The first reason I think is personal responsibility. Who's in charge of you? Who is responsible for your health? Is your MD? Is it your wife or your spouse? Is it your mom? Is it your insurance carrier? I hope not. Is it your accountant that tells you what you can spend your money on or where you're spending your money? Is it the government who is responsible for your health? Who is it? And I hope it's not the WHO, the World Health Organization. They're not responsible for your health. Who is? Can we all agree that we need to be responsible for our own health? Can we all agree with that? Give me a thumbs up if you're on board with that, right? It's up to us. Yeah, exactly. Okay, the second reason is, actually there's a third reason that I'm going to tell you later, and because I want to unpack a few more things before we get to it. The second reason, I think it's because we've lowered our expectations of health. We actually have normalized weak immune systems and chronic disease. And in fact, we've even changed the definition of health. Check it out. Most people think that you can simply toggle back and forth between healthy and sick. Kind of like, oh, I was not feeling so good on Monday, and then Tuesday I was really sick. And then Wednesday, I kind of started to feel a little better, Thursday better, Friday, yeah, by Saturday, I was healthy again. People think of toggling back and forth. I'm either sick or I'm healthy, like it's an on-off switch. But the reality is this. There's another zone here, which is the not sick zone. And I think that most people are actually spending most of their lives in the not sick zone, but they're not in the healthy zone. They're in the not sick zone. They may be undiagnosed, they may be asymptomatic, but they're not healthy. There's a difference. And unfortunately, they're spending their lives toggling back and forth between sick and not sick. There is a difference between sick and not sick. There is a difference between sick and diagnosed sick and sick and undiagnosed. There's a difference between sick and symptomatic and sick and asymptomatic. And there's also a difference between not sick and healthy. So we need a better definition for health than just being not sick. And if you have the wrong definition, then your choices may change and you may lead you in the wrong direction. So many people think of sick as the opposite of healthy. Actually, sick is not the opposite of healthy. Sick is the absence of health. Think of it the way you would think of light and dark, right? Light, right, is a thing that is measurable, right? I can turn, where's my switch here so I can demonstrate, right? I can turn the light off. Now I'm going into more darkness and I can turn the light on, right? So there's a thing there that's emanating light. Darkness is not a thing the way light is a thing. Darkness is the absence of a thing. Okay, so follow me here on this. So if you're in the dark and you don't like the darkness that you have, what should you do about that? I can see Richard. Richard, unmute yourself and tell me, what should you do if you don't like the darkness that you have? Unmute yourself. Can you unmute? Do you see the button? It's down the bottom. You're not unmuted. Bottom left, I think is.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah. If you're in the darkness and you don't like it, what should you do?
Turn a light on.
Add light, right?
Add light.
Exactly right. Yeah. Okay. So if you're sick and you don't like the sickness that you have, what should you do? Add health. Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah. So if we start to look at sickness and health differently, right? If you don't like the sickness that you're having, you just have to figure out, well, what do I need to build health here? I just need to start adding health. But what our culture has us doing is just managing the sickness so we don't feel it, but we're actually still sick as we go along. We just don't feel it. And it was Dr. Marcia Angel, who was the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine for about 20 years. Imagine the research that went in front of her. And she said, you can never medicate your way out of a problem you've behaved your way into. You'll just feel better as you're getting worse. Boy, there's some truth in that statement, isn't there? So let's now just look at, let's look at a better description of how your health works. This is a continuum, and this comes from three research studies that were repeated over a number of years. And so this is what they've come up with here. We are all on this continuum. And the question is, where are you? So mentally in your mind, place a mark where you are now. And that's going to, and this represents the potential spectrum of health. So the right side is high level wellness. The left side is premature death. And so I hope you can recognize in here that we have sickness on that left side. We have health on the right side, and the middle, the neutral zone, where there's no discernible illness or wellness. That's the not sick zone that we were just talking about. There's the three zones here. Now, remember that health is dynamic. It is fluid. It's always changing. It's never static. And so wherever you've planted yourself on this range, remember that you're going to be moving in one direction or the other. You're either going to be moving towards health or away from health. So which way do you think you're moving right now? Just mentally put an arrow above the mark where you are. You put a mental mark there of where you are. And think of an arrow of which direction you're heading. And then remember that there's a velocity and a momentum There's a speed to how fast you're moving in that one direction or the other. And right now, remember, you're only as healthy as your family. So anybody here have a spouse or kids? How about your spouse? If they're not here, like, where would you put them? Which direction are they heading? How about your kids? Where are they? What direction are they heading? Which way do you wish they were moving? Right? That's the question that we need to be asking. And if I asked your kids, what direction do they want you to go? Right? What do you think they would tell you? Right? We're all the same here. So I just wanted you to recognize this, because we've spent so much time now in our culture managing the symptoms so that you don't feel them. And we've made it okay to just live here. We've made it okay to have chronic illness and just manage it with medications. And now a pandemic comes along, and this is a huge vulnerability for our population because it's continued to allow us to be weak. So let's talk about the difference between, and just recognize that many people that were managing their chronic illness with medications, they were feeling okay, but literally they were more vulnerable to COVID when it came through. Like cardiovascular disease, you were more vulnerable. We know that. There's no question about that, right? And if you, diabetes, also more vulnerable, obesity, more vulnerable. So those folks were immunocompromised is really what it was, right? If you've been in that not sick zone, you may actually be immunocompromised. So let's talk about the difference between contagious and dangerous. There's a difference. The virus is contagious to everybody, but it's only dangerous to certain people. And it's dangerous to the immunocompromised. So what you should be asking yourself is, what do I need to do to make sure that I am not immunocompromised, so that I am immune competent? You want to be immunocompetent, not immunocompromised. So what do I need to do? What do I need to start doing? What do I need to stop doing so that I can reduce my risk? Remember, we want to shift our focus from the strength of the virus to the strength of the host. So what does it mean when I talk about immunocompromised? Who is immunocompromised? Well, some examples might be folks that have a genetic disorder, like that small percentage that literally come in with genes where there's a disorder. Someone with cystic fibrosis, for example, their lungs just are not working very well. Yeah, they would be immunocompromised. They would be definitely in a vulnerable situation with this kind of pandemic coming through. And yet I will tell you, I know folks with cystic fibrosis who actually not only survived having COVID, but they came out on the other side of it. So they actually did survive. So it wasn't an immediate death sentence just because they had it. People with pre-existing conditions, yep, they would be in that category of immunocompromised. People that are undergoing treatments, chemotherapy, something like that, yep, they would be in that. And oftentimes when we think of immunocompromised, the first thing we go to is, oh, someone with chemotherapy. But we realize that it's broader than that. The elderly, they may be in that category of immunocompromised. It would not be absolute just because it's not an age-dependent thing, but this is what it is. The elderly may be at risk because they've spent the last 30 or 40 years living in a genetically incongruent lifestyle with compounding effects that have then compounded sickness. So it comes back to the lifestyle choices. They have made themselves vulnerable because of the lifestyle choices, whether it was known or not. They may have thought that they were just doing the culture. This is how we live, and not knowing that our culture was programming it so that they were going to be moving towards chronic illness. Right. So I hope that this makes sense, because, and I hope you recognize that all in all, you don't get sick, you do sick. That's the truth. Trying to avoid a germ is not going to be the best strategy here. And we've learned that, right? Nobody's going to avoid this. We're all going to be exposed. The question is, what's going to happen when we are exposed? That's really what the question is. So if you look at an acorn there, right? There's an acorn sitting there. Richard, just tell me, and actually I'm going to call on, is Geraldine's? Yeah, Geraldine's still here. Geraldine, if you can unmute, you don't have to on video, but you can unmute. I want to ask you, right? Okay, Geraldine, an acorn, what is an acorn going to become?
An oak tree.
And is that every time that acorn is going to become an oak tree every time?
No, that's why so many fall on the ground.
All right, that's a good answer, right? That's a good answer because I was leading there and I was leading you to say, well, it's not going to be an elm tree, it's not going to be an apple tree, it's going to be an oak tree. So if it does grow into a tree, it will be an oak tree every time, right? But
Right.
you're right. You are right. If I took those acorns in my hand and I tossed them into the corner of the room over there, are they ever going to become an oak tree if they're just sitting in the corner of the room? Right?
No.
No, because they need certain things. So what would be missing?
Oh, the appropriate nutrients and environment.
That's right. Soil, rain, and sun are going to be missing, right? And there's no way they're going to become an oak tree unless we have the right environment. So this acorn, it's a seed, right? It's a nut, it's a seed. And the seed is an opportunist that is looking for the right environment. The seed is potential. It's the possibility, right? So the idea of trying to avoid the virus and the germs, you can't avoid them. The germs are everywhere. I mean, literally, if you looked under a microscope at what is in your spouse's mouth, you would see so many germs, you'd never kiss them again, right? You would just see that we have, right now in my body, I have 10 to the 15 viruses in my body right now, 10 to the 15, right? And that's not 10 to the 15 of a few different viruses. That's 10 to the 15 different viruses in my body right now, right? And we're trying to avoid one, right? And we're shutting the world down, trying to avoid one, right? So we should not be spending our energy on trying to avoid germs. We should be spending our energy on not becoming soil for them. We want to prepare ourselves so that we are inhospitable for these viruses to then turn into a disease. And so again, if we just look at this continuum again, we've got stronger on one side, we've got weaker on the other side. So what I'm going to move into now is I'm going to be sharing with you 5 areas for you to focus on. 4 of these areas are going to impact your health, and one of them is going to control your health. So I'm curious, which one do you think is the most important one? Nancy, I don't know if you're able to unmute or not, but which is going to be the most important one? The 4 that impact your health or the one that controls your health? Not there. Okay. Richard, what do you think? Which one's the most important one here?
Well, the one that controls your health.
Yes, yeah. So the other 4 are to make sure that you don't work against the one that controls everything. And we're going to unpack that here. All right, so we talked about Superman. And what is it that makes Superman vulnerable? Kryptonite, right? Kryptonite is dangerous to Superman. And so, what does kryptonite do to Superman? It makes him weak, right? So what is the kryptonite for us? What is it that's making us weak? Stress. Stress is kryptonite. And bad lifestyle choices create stress. Geraldine, did you raise your hand?
That was to just agree with you and say yes.
Awesome. All right, awesome. Yeah, yeehaw. Right. So, and if you think that stress affects your health, give me a thumbs up if you think that's true. Does stress affect your health? Does it? Can we all agree to that? Yeah.
Oh,
absolutely.
I see. A thumbs up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, wait. Okay. I don't
Thumbs
know.
up and hands up. That's fine. I got it. I'm following you. And so the things that affect our health that are stressful to us, we have to start looking at where those stresses are coming from. They're coming from bad diets, sedentary lifestyles, right? Stress is like kryptonite to your superpowers, and it is kryptonite to your immune system as well. It actually creates immunocompromise. So let's just take a look at what happens when we are stressed. We have something called the stress response. It's an adaptive physiology. It's where our nervous system goes into sympathetic dominance, and it's there to save our life. It programs us to go into fight or flight. And when we go into fight or flight, it's the best chance that we actually are going to be able to survive an attack by a tiger, something like that. So look at what our this is actually a superpower. This stress response is a superpower. Our blood pressure will go up. Our heart rate will go up. That's so that we have blood pumping out to those muscles so we can run or fight as best as possible. Our muscle tone goes up, ready to fight. Our digestion is going to slow down because that's a resource that we do not want to be feeding. We do not want energy to go to digestion when we're trying to fight a tiger. We want the blood to go out of the digestive system and get into the muscles. So digestion is going to slow down in stress mode. Reproduction is going to slow down. Not a good time to make babies when there's a tiger around, right? Serotonin levels go down. Not a good time to go to sleep when the tiger's around. Sensory systems are alert and up. We upregulate the sensory system, right? Watching, hearing, listening, perceiving what's going on in the environment. And tunnel vision will happen because when we see that tiger, we don't want to be distracted by anything else. We want to be focused just on that. Fear and anxiety are up because that actually pushes the cortisol, which is running this whole show. The insulin sensitivity is going to be downregulated because insulin takes the sugar out of the blood. We want sugar in the blood because we want that sugar to travel to the muscles to burn it as fuel instantly. So our blood sugar is going to go up. We're going to have a decrease in the HDLs and an increase in the LDLs. So that's going to flip what we think of as the healthy ratio. It's going to flip upside down because we need those lipids for making the cortisol. And in fact, even cholesterol will go up because the cholesterol is what we use for repairing wounds. So we're going to anticipate if we're encountering a tiger, chances are we might get wounded. We want that cholesterol right there to repair the tissue as quickly as we can. And our clotting factors will go up again. In case we get wounded, we want to be able to clot that right away. Our immune response is going to be downregulated. And the reason is that the immune system is a very expensive system to run. And when we're fighting the tiger, momentarily, we don't want to put resources into that. We want to be able to put resources into the immune system after the stress has passed. That's when we're going to need it for healing. So this is what happens in those moments when we're fighting a tiger. They should last maybe 15 seconds, no more than 15 minutes. Like by that time, you've escaped or you're lunch, right? You're either trying to get away and you're not lunch for the tiger or you are lunch, right? So the stress response is a superhuman power that will save our life in the occasion of a true life-threatening situation. It's an adaptive physiology. We go into the sympathetic state, but it was never meant to be long-lasting. And if we look at the stress response and we see it so that it is perpetuated over time, what does this look like? It looks like a heart attack about ready to happen. It looks like cardiovascular disease in the making, right? And this is what creates immunocompromise when we downregulate that immune system over time because of ongoing stress. So stress is like kryptonite to your superpowers and to your immune system. So what are the sources of stress? And you have to recognize where they're coming from because some of them are going under the radar for people. These are the sources of the stress. It's not just our thoughts. It's not just our thought of, oh my gosh, there's a tiger, right? It's the thoughts that are going on all the time, but it's also the chemical stresses and toxins that we're exposing ourselves to. It's also the traumas that we're exposing ourselves to. So it's the mental emotional category, it's the chemical category, and it's the physical category. How many of you feel like modern life is unnaturally stressful? Can I see a raise of the hand if you think that modern life is unnaturally stressful, right? Can we all agree that that's what's happening here in the last 2 years more than ever before, right? And, we know that stress makes us sick. We know that that's true. And we know that it's been stressful. And I just want to do a shout out here to, in the last year, our frontline health workers have been some of the most stressed people in our communities, right? And I know them. I know frontline health workers. I actually was offering free care to frontline workers over the last, during the first year of the pandemic. And so when I talk about stress in the nervous system, like I was palpating that stress in their bodies. And as people came in and they were getting their nervous system cleared and we were working with them and giving them strategies to manage the stress and teaching and guiding them, literally I would have them come in and say, it's remarkable. Like I'm in an environment and I'm not experiencing the anxiety I was experiencing before. And, another practice member that had back pain, and it was stress related from the physical stress of that work, but also from the intense mental emotional stress as well. And she was able to actually go through work, and her back pain was cleared up, and she was able to reconcile that and get stronger. And Lori, who was having neck pain, it was the awkward postures with the physical distancing and having to wear all that PPE. It was just crazy. So there were immense, not only was it a stressful job, but now you add to it even more stress on them with having to deal with the PPE and the physical distancing and the isolation. It was craziness. There was so much stress there. And so I want you to know that the mindset was definitely part of that. And so here I want to now go into what were the things, how did I coach these folks? What were the things that I did with them? Like at the front line, the ones that were the hardest hit by the stress of this whole last 2 years. These are the things that were important. Our mindset. What do we need to stop doing is regarding our mindset. We have to stop limiting our thinking. We have to stop worrying, and we have to stop holding grudges. All right. And so it's interesting that there were studies that came out of the New England Journal of Medicine. There was the Carnegie Mellon study. And what they did is they literally took human beings, and this was back in 1991, and they dripped viruses into their noses. This was a study. These people volunteered for this, to be part of this study, to have viruses stuck right up their nose. And these were common cold viruses. But you know what? Those common cold viruses, they were rhinoviruses. They were coronaviruses as well. There were coronaviruses, adenoviruses that were all part of this study. And so they dripped them right into their noses. Everyone had the exact same exposure. Did everyone come down with a cold? No. Just like the coronavirus, people were exposed, some got sick. And when they looked at, and of course, with the pandemic, some people died as well. In this study, nobody died. It was the common cold. Some people had no symptoms at all, and they got the exact same exposure. The ones that did get sick, what they noticed they had in common is they were people that were either worrying about the future or regretting something about the past. Those were the ones that got sick, that had that extra stress on their bodies. They also noticed that people that were judgmental, that were judging things, that they, got into that or stressed about it. And that was one of the factors that lowered their immune resistance, and they were the ones that got sick. Isn't that incredible that we have that? And that was back in 1991, we knew that, right? There's a great book by a fellow named Bruce Lipton. It's called The Biology of Belief. The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. If you want to just dive into this topic, he's a fantastic author. And I want to just give you a few other things that you can jot down here. But first, I'm going to go into, we talked about these are the things you want to stop doing. What do you want to start doing? When it comes to mindset, you want to use the human mind. Now, the human mind is different from all the other brains of the other species. And we have something called a prefrontal cortex. Our prefrontal cortex is where our humanity lives. And it is a unique phenomenon in the human brain that we literally can use our thoughts to take a stressful situation, and we can just think differently about it and turn the stress switch off. It's a uniqueness in the human brain. We can actually imagine things into the future. We can imagine things from out of the past. We can use our brain to bring ourselves into the past or into the future. We can use that in a positive way or a negative way. And so we literally can do vision casting. We can imagine what we want. We can imagine where we would like to go, whether it's with our health or with our careers or with our families. We can actually start to spend time vision casting what we want. And so just as that study showed us, the people that were worrying about what might happen, I heard that described as worry is a prayer you do not want answered, right? When you're worrying, you're thinking about it, you're putting energy into it. What if we could just choose to spend our thoughts and our energy doing something else and vision casting what we want, being in alignment with our values, right? Looking at our life and seeing what are we doing, who are we spending time with that is in alignment with our values, and who are we spending time with that is out of alignment with our values? Who are we spending our time with every day? How are we spending our time every day? The things we're doing, is it in alignment with our values? They did a study where they put the electrodes on the brains of people, and they showed them disturbing, stressful images, and they got them in a stress state. And then they wanted to see what is the best thing that they can do to take them out of the stress state, to turn the stress switch off. And they found that the thing that turned the stress switch off the fastest is when people went to thinking thoughts of gratitude. What am I grateful for? And even if it had nothing to do with the stress that was present, just being grateful for something else over here that I'm grateful for, it helped to turn the stress switch off. And if somebody could find something to be grateful for the exact thing that they're being stressed about, that turned the stress switch off in the most powerful way. So there's something called equilibration. Dr. John DeMartini is a chiropractor, and he wrote a book where he talks about equilibration. So I forget the name of his book, but if you do a search on DeMartini, chiropractor, and equilibration, you're going to find it. And he basically said, how can we find the good in what we're experiencing? How can we find gratitude? So that's another tool that you can use. Dr. Joe Dispenza is doing amazing work with vision casting and how to really just think about your ideal life and how you manifest it. Dr. Joe Dispenza, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself is one of his great books, because we just get into habits on how we think as well. Louise Hay is she has been one of the pioneers in how our thoughts affect our health. Love her work. And then Byron Katie is another great author. She wrote a book called Loving What Is that I highly recommend as well. In the first 20 pages, you're going to learn everything you need to know from that book. I love it because of that. Get it all in the first 20 pages. The rest of it is just examples, but she basically teaches you 4 questions you can ask that will bring you from a stress state into one of just being centered and at peace. And she literally took herself out of an insane asylum where she was kind of locked away, and she got herself healthy just by asking herself these 4 questions. She just figured it out. And now she's sharing it and helping millions of people over the years. And then I do teach EFT, emotional freedom technique, tapping on the endpoints of acupuncture meridians to turn the stress switch off. Another fantastic tool to use. And that's another workshop. Ask me about it in the practice if I haven't already introduced you to that. Okay, what else can we be doing? Sleep. What do we need to stop doing around this category of sleep? There's some important things here. Stop screens before bed. It's not just the content of the screens. So it's not just watching that, oh my gosh, the media and all the fear that's being drummed up, and then you try to go to sleep, right? It's not just the content. It's actually the screens themselves, the frequencies that they're emanating, and the blue screens, the blue light that comes out of the screens. It actually puts you into a very alert, awake state. So your body gets confused. It doesn't know that it's actually nighttime and time to go to sleep. So we have circadian rhythms that we are responsive to, and it's light that can make those circadian rhythms go sideways. So, having an e-fast, a screen fast, electronics fast, and some say 90 minutes before you go to sleep. Some say you can get it at least 30 minutes, but if you're not getting the sleep that you want, then you probably need to turn those screens off sooner, right? So shoot for that 90 minutes before you go to sleep. Also, avoid sleep procrastination. We are the only species on the planet that voluntarily don't get enough sleep. We just decide to just not get enough sleep. There's no other species on the planet that does that, right? And so I also find EFT and gratitude before bed is a great thing. So if you are laying there feeling stressed, I have my 4-2-1 routine that I use. 4 is think of 4 things that you're grateful for. Any 4 things, just think of the things that I'm so grateful for, and really let yourself feel the gratitude of each of those 4 things. The number 2 goes with thinking about 2 things that you love. I love this, right? Just think of what those 2 things are. It can be different every night, but think of 2 things that you love, 4 things you're grateful for, 2 things that you love. And the one is thinking about, what do I need some support with right now? I could use a little help with this thing, and just offer it up, right? 4, 2, 1, 4 things you're grateful for, 2 things you love, 1 thing you could use some help with, and then just release it. And I'll tell you that most of the time I hardly get past the second thing I'm grateful for before I'm falling asleep, right? But if I'm still there, I go through the 4, 2, 1. So it's a great, just quick tool to use. Or I might do some EFT tapping if I'm finding that I'm just lying there awake, thinking, stressed about something. Do a little round of tapping and turns the stress switch off. And also alcohol. So alcohol, sometimes people use alcohol to try and relax, but actually alcohol has been shown to disrupt proper sleep. So please don't rely on alcohol as the way for you to deal with sleep. There's a great book called Why We Sleep. It was written by Matthew Walker out of Berkeley. And he really does, if you're having trouble with sleep and good sleep practices, then put some time into reading his book, because it'll help you if you have to unpack it a bit. But he definitely says it flat out, if you do not get 8 hours of sleep, you have dropped the efficiency of your immune system by 50%. Yep, 50%. So really you want to focus on, it's non-negotiable. And he said you can never engage in what he refers to as sleep procrastination, right? So just, you can't like stay up late to see something or somebody on TV and think that now I had 1 less hour of sleep, that'll be okay, I'll get away with it. You won't over time. Yeah. And remember that you want to have complete darkness in the room so that your melatonin production is correct. What do I need to start doing regarding sleep? 8 hours of sleep. You want to be shooting for those 8 hours, and creating a sleep sanctuary, right? So really get the screens out of the bedroom. It's a good idea. A lot of people, I like to read before bed. Read a book, a real book, right? But when you get those, the Kindles and the light that comes off of them, I know there's some that you can get the black coming off. I think that's probably better, but if you're not getting good sleep, then look at these things and just have your sleeping room be the sanctuary that it should be. And also just looking at this surface that you are sleeping on, that you want it to be a healthy surface. An uncomfortable bed, not only can it harm your spine, but which can lead to harming your health, but it can also interrupt with good sleep. So we have the proper pillows here in the office that are the best way to support your neck when you're sleeping. If you want to know more about that, let me know. When people ask me what's the best kind of beds to use, I love the Sleep Number bed. There's another brand, it's called BioPosture beds, but they literally, you can change them based on what your physiology is. So I do like those too. All right, what's the next part here? Diet style. What do we need to stop doing when it comes to our diet style? So again, we're going to look at what are the toxic foods that are getting in, where's the added sugar that's getting in, and let's just talk about this idea of thinking that you can starve yourself as a strategy. So toxins and deficiencies. So remember, the toxins are going to come in the forms of additives and preservatives. So again, just natural foods are going to be the best way to go there. And some of those toxins literally are excitotoxins that are going to stimulate your brain. That's going to interfere with sleep as well, but literally can stimulate nerve cells to actually stimulate them to death. Excitotoxins. So additives and preservatives, look at that. Sugar it can tank your immune system. They did a study where they looked at if you took 1 glass of orange juice, right? So you may think that, oh, my immune system is a little low. I want to get some vitamin C and I'm going to have some orange juice. They did this study. This was in 1973. And they found, this was in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. They found that a glass of orange juice collapsed the innate immune system response for at least 5 hours and often for as long as 12 hours. Why was that? It wasn't because of the vitamin C. That was a good part. It was because there was so much sugar in the orange juice, like fruit sugar, but because it had no pulp in it, it wasn't eating an orange, it was squeezing just the juice out, which is an immense amount of sugar. And so sugar will tank your immune system for anywhere from 5 to 12 hours. Yeah, and even just a teaspoon of cane sugar tanks the immune system for 45 minutes right then and there. So if you're looking at bulletproofing your immune system, you got to really just get rid of all the added sugar. All right. And then this idea of starving yourself. Now, remember, that means there's going to be a deficiency. So toxicities and deficiencies are the way to think of your diet and what you need to stop doing. So you want to stop adding toxins, and you want to stop having nutritional deficiencies. If you eat empty calories, it is the equivalent of starving yourself. So you'll feel full, but you're not getting the nutrients that you need. Your body literally is, you're starving because you're not getting the nutrition that you need, even if you feel full, if you're putting low quality foods into your body. Foods that our ancestors would not even call food, right? Right? What our ancestors would call food, that's what you want to eat. But nowadays we have things that I'm not even sure that it has any food in it. It's, completely imitation and artificial. So look closely at how convenience foods, we have to watch out for that, because they may actually be creating deficiencies because they're taking up room instead of the good things getting in. So what do we need to start doing? We need to start hydrating our body. Every cell in our body requires water in order to run. If we are dehydrated, our body has to figure out some other way to have all those reactions happen. And so it has to create some other fluid. It will create mucus as a way to move things around. And mucus, that's equated with immune systems like runny noses, right? So if you have persistent upper respiratory infections, allergies, and like your sinuses get blocked up, as far as like the immune system goes, hydrating should tend to reduce that, because you'll minimize the histamines in your body, which are what trigger the creation of mucus. So hydration is key. A paleo diet is a very good way to go, because it's an ancestral diet. It's what our genes were designed for. And so I want to show you that. I'm going to also talk about supplementation here. So when we talk about a paleo correct diet, right, this is something, again, if you're thinking about eating to boost your immune system strength, it's going to be unlimited vegetables, abundant, lean, natural meats. And when I talk about natural meats, I want to talk about the animals that are treated in a nice way, right? Not the CAFO factory farmed animals, but the ones that are grass-fed, pasture, free range, right? Those are the natural meats. Some fruit, nuts, and seeds, limited starch, and no sugar. Our ancestors would not have had sugar. Like, they might come across a honey pot at some point, in the tree that they're getting stung to get some of that honey. And then they're going to go a long time with no sugar in their diets. And so not every single day the way we have it in our culture, modern culture, right? So just recognize that if you're not eating this way, you could be creating deficiencies. And so you want to make sure that you have a supply of the essential nutrients so your immune cells can make you so your immune cells won't make you immunocompromised, right? You want to, if you have a deficiency, then you're going to be immunocompromised because you can't create what you need to create. You don't have the building blocks. So we need those essential building blocks in order to build the cells of our immune system. Organic is best, processed less is best, less GMO, more nutrients. Sugar, again, it's very toxic and addictive. So it's an overall lifestyle. It's just one of the components. It's not the only thing. It's one of the components. And we need that synergy, just like we need soil, we need sun, we need water for that acorn. Now, supplementation, again, this is a supplement. It's not in place of a good diet. It's to supplement a good diet, right? So that's the way we want to think about supplementation, as already get the good diet, but then add more to it. And again, this is just for really bulletproofing your immune system. And so all the robust studies are showing this, that vitamin D, vitamin D, A, and K, they work together synergistically, but especially that vitamin D. I mean, we got a Nobel Prize for discovering vitamin D, and not for strong bones. Nope, the Nobel Prize was for infection, recognizing the role that vitamin D played in infection. And so that's because the innate immune response is controlled by vitamin D. And so supplementing with vitamin D And actually, it actually decreased not only the incidence of, but the severity of respiratory illnesses like cold and flu. We already knew that. And then the studies are already showing, even talking about COVID, high vitamin D levels, very low risk of dying or even hospitalization. Low vitamin D levels, those are the folks that are getting the bad outcomes. Vitamin C is just one of a network of components of a healthy immunological cascade that would also include not only vitamin C, but vitamin E. Alpha lipoic acid is another big one. And then also fish oil. So the omega-3s are really important for the immune system. The other ones that we found that have been useful, especially these times, are selenium, zinc, quercetin. Quercetin is actually, it's an, pardon me, it's a zinc ionosphere. Actually, I have a slide on here. So I want to show you the studies here. Actually, I'm going to go up here. One more thing before I go on to the next slide. At the bottom, I have something called ion biome, gut restoring. This is a substance that actually helps with leaky gut. So if you have leaky gut, that's going to impact your immune system. And so ion is one of the, I love that product. It used to be called Restore. That was its old name, but they rebranded it to ion. And so that's a really powerful piece because 80% of our immune system is in the lining of our gut. So if we're not taking care of a healthy gut, that's where pre and probiotics come into play as well. Then that could impact our immune system. So just check out here, nutrition to treat and prevent COVID-19. This came out in January of 2021. And they showed, I mean, I love what it says here. It has been clearly shown over decades that several essential nutrients, including vitamin C, vitamin D, magnesium, zinc, and selenium, have antiviral properties. Like we know all of this. There's no surprise here. And the majority of the hospitalized COVID-19 individuals had deficiencies in one or more of these nutrients. The severe pneumonia that, as in COVID-19, it depletes many of the body's essential nutrients. This then generates acute nutritional deficiencies that make COVID more lethal. It's been shown in recent medical trials that simply administering vitamin C and vitamin D, it had a huge impact. And again, just high doses, but were very effectively treating the COVID-19 and preventing the severe pneumonia and death. So, you know, we have the research that shows that. This one, again, vitamin D appears to play a role in COVID-19 mortality rates, right? It's showing us right there. Quercetin improves the zinc uptake. It's an ionophore. It drastically improves the uptake of the zinc. And the zinc is what, once it gets into the cell, then it can kill the virus, but it has to get into the cell in order to do that. So that's why that is showing so strongly. Here we have the gut microbiota. The composition reflects disease severity, dysfunctional immune responses in patients with COVID-19. So, you know, it's the depletion of having the gut microbiome in a diverse state is what contributes to that severe COVID-19 disease. A dysbiotic gut microbiota, that means unhealthy balance of the gut microbes, is one of the factors in developing the persistent symptoms, that multi-system inflammation syndromes that are occurring in some folks after they clear the virus. That's that long haul COVID that we talk about. So bolstering of beneficial gut species that were depleted actually is a way to mitigate severe disease and to manage if you manage that gut microbiota, it shows that it seems to limit the impact of long haul showing up, long haul COVID. Movement. What do we need to stop doing when it comes to movement? Stop being sedentary, right? And we have to stop the macro traumas, the big traumas, and we also need to stop the micro traumas. All right, so I want you to understand what I mean here. Again, macro traumas, that's having a big fall, car accident, sports injury, work accidents, slips and falls. Obviously, these are stressing and damaging the body, but we have to zoom in on an even bigger risk factor that's in modern life. And the real culprit behind so much of the physical stresses we have is not the one-off macro traumas, falls and so on, injuries. It's the micro traumas that are the problem. And so like these people, they're not quite 6 feet apart, but you get what I mean here, right? So they're all doing their thing on their devices, and look at their posture. look at how their head is bent forward, right? So we oftentimes hear people say, oh, don't sweat the small stuff like viruses and bullets and deer ticks, right? Those are all small things, right? Well, this is a very dangerous premise when it comes to micro traumas from posture, poor posture. So postural stress is associated with sitting in front of screens and monitors, as well as laptops, tablets, mobile phones, and it's collectively known as tech stress. And it is arguably one of the most serious health threats of the modern world is this micro trauma from poor posture. And what both the macro traumas and the micro traumas, what they lead to, these types of stresses, they lead to something called subluxations. Subluxations are joints misaligned in the spine that cause soft tissue damage. That damage then creates inflammation and irritates the nerves. And when those nerves get irritated, our smart body is going to spasm the muscles around that joint to strap that joint down to stop the movement, which is irritating the nerve more and more. When we strap that joint down, we create a joint fixation. Now, all of these joints are sending messaging to the brain to tell the brain what's happening in the body. We have something called mechanoreceptors that when we move a joint, it sends a message to the brain and the brain says, oh, I know where the body is because when you're moving, I get feedback. When we strap down a joint, in the case of a subluxation, and we no longer are moving that joint, the brain stops getting the signaling and it starts to feel like it's losing track of what's happening in that area. Similar to if you're a parent and you have a small one and you're in a crowd and suddenly you lose track of where that kid is. Where's my kid? We go into a stress response with that. When the brain stops getting the proper proprioceptive input to the brain about telling the brain where the body is from movement, when it stops getting that movement, we will increase our stress hormone production in the whole body. We will go into a global stress response. And we already know when we go into a global stress response, when cortisol levels are high, what happens to our immune system? It alters our immune system function. So there is irrefutable evidence and high biological plausibility that the relationship between a segmental problem in the spine, which increases something called nociception, which is getting bad signaling going to the brain. Proprioception is good signaling that gives the brain perspective of where the body is. Nociception is getting bad signals going to the brain that are distorted. And this changes the sympathetic activity. Remember, sympathetic nervous system is stress mode. And those changes then lead to a whole cascade that occurs from your hypothalamus in your brain to your pituitary, to your adrenals, going that whole way that increases cortisol in the body, increases that stress response. And that has that relationship that then downregulates the immune system and downregulates our overall health. So when we decrease the proprioception, it causes the same problems. The literature is full of material that shows that even an increase in pain actually will trigger sympathetic nervous system to be higher. And the neuroendocrine system, that's the hormones in the body, will go out of autonomic balance. So we literally find that this whole idea of allostatic load, which is like your capacity to manage stress, right? Think of a rain barrel and it's filling up with water. And then there's a certain point where it just starts to overflow. We call that allostatic load. That's our capacity to manage the stresses that we have. And when it starts overflowing, we are no longer managing it. And that's when it starts to affect our health. And so we really do understand that when we are overloading our bodies with stresses and we're overloading that allostatic load, it will change our autonomic nervous systems so that we move towards a sympathetic dominance, and that sympathetic dominance will tank our immune system. So that is the link. That's connecting the dots between how overloading stresses affect our health and affect our immune system. All right, so when we look at the spine, I want to just show you here this idea of our spine being our suit of armor. Right, the spine, right, it is the structure. We encase our Our nervous system is encased in bone because the nervous system is very delicate. Our brain is delicate. It has a helmet that protects it. Our spinal cord carrying the messages from the brain down the spine and then out through the nerve roots. It is delicate, so it needs to be encased and protected in bone. So our spinal column is what protects us, right? It protects our nervous system. Our spine is our lifeline between the brain and the body. And if we need to protect it. And if we have any misalignments of the bone, right? If you misalign the vertebra, it puts pressure on the nerve, right? That's what then is going to lead to imbalance in the body, and it's going to affect our function. So it goes beyond just a global stress response, right? We know that the human nervous system, there's actually a map to it. And so when we have any misalignments of the vertebrae that are interfering with the nerves that exit out of that area, whatever part of the body that nerve's in charge of controlling, we may see a loss of function in that area. So the nerves coming out of the neck might affect the arms, the nerves coming out of the low back affect the legs, and so on. But these nerves also go to our autonomic nervous system, parasympathetic and sympathetic nerves, and they're controlling the organs in our body. And so if we have any disturbance in the flow of messages coming through the spine, we then can start to disturb how those organs are functioning. Some of those organs are immune system organs. Our spleen is an immune system organ. Our thymus gland is an immune system organ. And we can show in studies that if you compromise the nerve supply to those immune system organs, then they don't work as well. And that can contribute to immunocompromise or poor immune function. We know that the lymphatic system is part of our immune system function. So if any aspect of the lymph is being interfered with because the nerve that controls that area is impacted, it can impact the immune system. We know that immune cells are grown in our bone marrow, and then we store them in our spleen, right? If we have immunocompromise, or if we have, rather, let me say, nervous system compromised in the nerves that control the bone marrow, we may not be producing the immune cells that we need to. So this is how it is all linked. The nervous system is the master system in the body. Remember, we talked about that. I was going to tell you there were 4 areas that will affect our health, but 1 area that controls our health. And it is the immune system. It is the nervous system that controls the immune system. It's the nervous system that controls every other system in the body. And so it's the master system. And we know what the map of the nervous system is. It's like a fuse box with wires that go into different rooms of the house and nerves that go to different organ systems. Sometimes when people think about their health, they keep equating it back to how they feel, right? And that's dangerous if we're looking at how we feel, because the nerves that sense pain, for example, are only 10% of our nervous system. The other 90% of the nervous system is doing other things rather than feeling pain. Then the 90% includes running the muscles and then running the organs, blood vessels, and glands, including the immune organs, are being controlled by the autonomic nervous system. So we can't just depend on how we feel to determine how healthy we are. And if we have subluxations, they could, maybe you have pain if you have a subluxation or a misaligned vertebrae putting pressure on the nerves, but you may not have pain. It's only 10% of the nerves. Maybe it's impacting the nerves that go to the organs or to the muscles, and you don't feel pain from that, but it could be compromising function. So again, the stress response, remember, this is what will downregulate the immune system, this adaptive physiologic state that we should only be in for a short period of time. Remember that stress is kryptonite to our immune system. And now I hope you understand that subluxations, stress causes subluxations, and subluxations are creating a weakness in our body. So subluxations are kryptonite to our body as well. So when we look at what do we need to start doing when it comes to movement, we need to start having burst exertion exercise. Burst exertion exercise literally turns the stress switch off in the brain. And that, of course, is going to improve immune system function. Exertion, also sweating, panting and sweating is key. You know, there are people that I walk 5 miles every day. Do you ever break a sweat? Oh no, I'm really efficient at that 5 miles. I can do that over and over every day. if you're not breaking a sweat, then you're not doing exertion. Well, let me put it this way. If you're not panting, you're not doing exertion. Like you could be swimming and panting and you don't know that you're sweating. You could be outside where it's cold and not necessarily break a sweat. So the most important thing is that you're getting the panting exercise in, and that means you're getting into an exertion mode. So if you walk the same route, I want you to start pushing yourself, walk as fast as you can when you're going up the hill and so on, so that you get that burst exertion in. And that is what turns the stress switch off. And so it's one of the things, again, that is the link between mechanics of the body and how it impacts the sympathetic nervous system. Looking at ergonomics is so important. What is your posture when you're on your devices or when you're at work? We want to have good ergonomics to protect the health of our spine. So that's so important. And if you don't have good ergonomics, now you're going to be recreating subluxations over and over again in your spine. And then, of course, you just have to get checked for subluxation just to see whether or not you have them. So that's so important as well. Physical fitness definitely played a role when it comes to the impact of fitness versus fatness in COVID-19 prognosis. They literally found that the current state of physical activity in COVID-19 is a tale of two pandemics, right? So you have the people that are fit and moving their body, and they had a whole different experience from the pandemic than the ones that didn't, right? 17% lower risk of hospitalization if you were more active, and healthy living for a pandemic event protection, right? They even have a HL pivot, right? And the goal was to improve global health and to protect individuals from the risks associated with chronic disease and viral infections. And exercise was definitely an important part of that, improving exercise capacity. So to honor that, I'm going to have everybody, let's just do a little bit of exercise here. We're going to do our life extension exercises. You will love this. Why? That's our that's our first one. So stretch your fingers up towards the ceiling as high as you can. Take a breath in and then breathing out. That's our Y. W, getting your elbows into your back pocket, right? Pushing it down as strongly as you can, right? That's our W. L is that angle with our elbows and having them open wide as you can, right? That's L. Right, feeling the scapula, your wing bones approximating. And then T, arms stretched out to the side, right? Our life extension exercise is just getting your body moving. So we recommend you do these twice a day. Same thing as you brush your teeth, right? If you brush your teeth twice a day, it extends the life of your teeth. And if you do the life extension exercises twice a day, extending your life is the idea behind that. So YWLT, and it helps to reconcile the time that we spent caved in, shoulders rounded on our devices. So life extension exercises regularly. Here's an amazing study that was done, an observatory study that was done by Masha and Dasha. Masha and Dasha were Siamese twins. How many of you know the story of Masha and Dasha? It's extraordinary. And it's a curious example. They were Siamese twins. They were joined at the hip. So they had shared circulatory systems that were interconnected, but they had separate organs. Like they had their own hearts, but the blood pumping through their system was shared because the circulatory system was shared. So they shared each other's blood. Therefore, a bacteria or a virus that entered one twin's bloodstream would soon be seen in the blood of her sister. Yet surprisingly, illness affected them differently. Dasha was more bent over to the side, was short-sighted, and was more prone to colds. Masha actually smoked occasionally, but had a healthier constitution. She had higher blood pressure than her sister. She had good eyesight. They had different health patterns, which was such a mystery to the people observing. Why did one of them become ill with a childhood disease like measles, for example, while the other did not? They both had the measles virus in their bloodstream. One had the disease of measles and one did not. Does that blow your mind about what we thought about how viruses worked? It wasn't the presence of the virus that was the problem, right? We've been talking about that all night long now, haven't we? That it's the strength of the host, not the strength of the virus. Yep. So the measles bug was in both of their bodies in their collective bloodstream. Why didn't they both get the measles? So there's more to getting the measles than just having the measles bug. And this was seen over and over again with them, with flus and colds and other childhood diseases that they experienced separately. If germs alone had the power to cause infectious diseases, why would one of the twins be disease-free while the other was ill? What was it in their makeup that differentiated one from the other? And we have to just look. They had common circulatory systems, common digestive systems, common excretory systems, lymphatic systems, hormonal systems. They were joined at the hips, but they had separate spinal columns and spinal cords. They had separate nervous systems. All their other systems were intertwined and shared, but their nervous systems were separate. I wonder if that was the difference. One of them was more bent over, right? More distortion, more stress on the spine, perhaps more subluxations and compromise to the nervous system. And that was the one that was sicker. Pretty phenomenal, right? Who would have ever thought? And when will we ever get that kind of information? But from the Masha and Dasha, bless them. Thank you so much for that. And what a life they had. Chronic sinus infections. So this is an example. Elaine, she was in my practice, started care in March of 2016, came in with headache and neck pain, didn't mention that she also had chronic sinus infections, allergies, asthma, eczema. Every year she was under care, she had better and better lifestyle changes. And in 2018, she encountered idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura. It normalized within a few months and then remained stable. We were adjusting her through the whole thing. Her doctors couldn't believe, wow, that was amazing that she was able to just normalize that. And, you know, there were certain ways that we were adjusting her and how we were guiding her on lifestyle. 2019, she says her sinuses were the clearest they had ever been. She had the best pollen season ever. She was able to do yard work, housework with plenty of stamina. February 2020, breathing best it had ever been. Okay, now think of her when she started care in 2016. We were building health through all those years. She's somebody that would have been at risk when a pandemic runs through. And yet her breathing was the best it had ever been coming into February 2020. Really good timing for her to have improved her health, right? Superpowers were strong. Other examples, I have seniors that did not get sick the entire season, didn't get colds or flus, even with lots of travel. Their allergies were better. They were blown away. They traveled all the time. They were always picking up something on a flight. And as they were under care, that was no longer happening. They were not even getting jet lag, is what they were telling me, right? From just having that more adaptable neuroimmune system. So how would you know if you have a subluxation? We want to use objective tests to measure that. So we use motion palpation, feeling, is there motion in the joint or is it fixated because of the subluxation that's being strapped down? We can actually do static palpation. Is there actually a misalignment that we can palpate and feel the spine, feel the misalignment? We look at posture. Posture is the window to the spine. Is there poor posture? Is there imbalanced posture? We'll use x-rays to look at whether there is any degenerative change in the spine and whether there's a loss of the proper biomechanics. And we'll use instrumentation. And this is the instrumentation that we use that tells us about the health of the nervous system, but also can give us clues on the health of the immune system by looking at how the nervous system is playing out. So when we look at our thermal scans, we're measuring how the nervous system is affecting the organs, tissues, and circulation in the body. And so you can see a healthy normal thermal scan on the left. Everything is white. It's all within the normal range, healthy normal. And we see, here's an example of a scan that we ran. And where we see color is where there's indications of nerve interference. And we know what the map of the nervous system is here as well. So we know this area of the body is a lot about the upper parts of digestion, the stomach, but also blood sugar handling, also the spleen, the adrenals, the liver is all part of the nerve supply that this is in charge of. And down into the small intestines. And now the bottom is the large intestines. So we can see how, oh, that might impact someone's immune system function if those organs were not working the way that they should be. We also find that there's other scans that we do as well. So if you are curious, if you're in the practice, you already know we're monitoring that all the time, but maybe you're going to share this information with someone and they are curious, right? And so if you haven't been scanned, you may not know whether or not you have interference in your nervous system that may be affecting your immune system. So remember, we talked about the 4 different things that can impact and affect your health, but the one thing that controls your health, and that's the nervous system. So if you haven't had nervous system scans, then you don't have all of the information that you need to really know what's going on with your nervous system. So it's so important that that is checked. And finally, we come to procrastination. Remember, I said that there were 3 things. We said that there was personal responsibility, there was the wrong definition of health. Procrastination is the thief of health. And the reason is that it's something called LODI, the law of diminishing intention. So when we put something off, we get less and less certain about doing that thing. And then it just, we run out of steam and it doesn't have. So people may have good intentions. Oh, I'll take care of my health next year. This year is not a good year. I'm kind of too busy right now. Don't have enough time. It's too hard. Yeah, I'll start exercising on Monday, or not this Monday, but maybe next Monday, right? Procrastination kills, right? Cancer doesn't wait. Diabetes doesn't wait. Viruses don't wait. Subluxations don't wait. The bad boys don't wait, right? Procrastination is the thief of health. So just think of, what would Elaine's life have been like if she didn't take care of her health back 4 years ago? What would her outcomes have been? We don't get to know the answer to that, but we can imagine how she would have a worse outcome from that. So you get the idea. If you know somebody that is maybe struggling with their health, with their immune system, we're going to have this recording available so we can pass that on to you as well. Who do you know that is struggling with this right now? Friends, family members, neighbors, coworkers, maybe you're somebody that's concerned too. And so let us know how we can help. I want you to just think about what your action steps are here. What are your action steps? What are your takeaways of what you're going to be doing so that you can make the changes that you want to make? And remember that, again, you can just have people text us Bulletproof 985-9850. And I want you to also know that I know that your loved ones are important to you too. So if there's anybody that you know that you think it might be a good idea for them to get checked, if they just send us a text Bulletproof, then what we'll do is we'll offer them their new patient exam. It's usually $220, and we do all the scans and everything. And we're going to cap it at 47. I mean, if you think about the scans that we do, right, you can't even get those scans in the hospital. But if you did and insurance wasn't going to cover it, you'd be looking at thousands of dollars. Here in our office, the usual cost is only $220. And we're even going to cap that at 47 for the people that you know that you want to refer into us. So I hope that's fair enough, right? That we make it easy for people to get in. And I'm going to finish up now with this last story. There was a family, they had a tradition that however many candles you had on your cake, which was going to be related to your age, right? You could have that many wishes. That was their tradition. And so they would share all the wishes that they had when it was their birthday. And so when the dad turned 40 years old, he had 40 different wishes that he had that were just so fun to hear about, all the things that he was wishing for. And then a year later, when he was 41, he only had one wish because he had cancer. And his one wish was to have his health back. So when you have your health, you have many wishes. But when you lose your health, you only have one, is to get that health back. So my goal is for you and your family to have as many wishes as possible. That's what my goal is for you. I hope that you found that this was useful information, that you now are equipped with exactly what you need to do to bulletproof your immune system. You know what you need to do. So think about what your action steps are and take them. Start immediately. Start taking those actions. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I'm going to sign off now. I'm going to stop the recording. And I do want to, let me just stop the recording here first. Let's see.